Yeah. Tell us about exactly the sorts of things that you were learning about. Like, so you were taking, what sorts of classes were you taking? How did you end up in this kind of area where you're being exposed to critical pedagogy? Because it's not necessarily something that you will encounter if you go to college, right?
Yeah. There's not going to be like a class on like, this is what critical race theory, like we're now learning it from like it's like the vehicle with which you learn about different subjects sometimes. So for example, sociology, I remember sociology was one class, and we had another class on symbolism, where we learned about especially Hollywood. And I feel like learning about Hollywood is the easiest way to sort of introduce these concepts, because Hollywood does have a history of being like racist and very like patriarchal, and
Sure.
you know, the white straight male is sort of the center of all these movies. So it's very easy to be like, okay, see this? This is how the entire America is. This is all people think about. So you kind of introduce it in that way. So a lot of film classes were viewed in that lens. And I will say, just for the record, there is always some truth to that. It's not to say that, oh, now I just reject that and white males weren't always the center of movies. It's like, I do agree with like the whole concept of the male gaze and the white gaze and a lot of like bell hook stuff. But there was also the surrounding pedagogy of just like, this is how America is, and, you know, kind of bouncing back and forth between the class. But most distinctly, I remember critical thinking, class called critical thinking, where I was like ready to learn about like logical fallacies. I was like super excited about it because I was like, yeah, I want to learn how to debate. I used to debate in high school. And so I was very stoked. And in that class, we did not learn about any of like the actual critical thinking, like as you would imagine it being like, oh, this is logic and this is how you set up an argument. It was about gentrification and reading news titles, and like somehow, you know, it was about like reading between the lines of news titles and kind of finding the racism or the cis heteronormativity like within the article, if that makes sense. So that was what constituted critical thinking, that particular class.
Wait, so it's like critical theory embedded in critical thinking.
Exactly.
That sounds like that was actually the name of the class.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the intention of the class, was to get people to see, like find where the racism is. And because I already had a premise of what critical thinking as that class should have been, like what it should have taught, I knew that something was off about it, but I don't, like, other students might not know that that's not actually what you are supposed to learn in like a critical thinking class.
I hope you got a refund for that class, because finding racism everywhere is basically Twitter. You could have just learned that on Twitter.
Right. It was crazy. And that was the entire course was just going through newspapers and trying to find like, just trying to be the most woke about what's happening in the world. Yeah. And so I did end up like believing what the teacher was, because I was still surrendering to the professors to teach me about American life. So I was like, okay, you know what? I agree. I will look for the bend and like the racism and all of these things that are around me. So yeah.